So with that, I welcome our next speaker. His name is Matt. He just turned his camera on, and he will tell us a story of, well, transformation of one company. A journey 3 years long, and it's really interesting, and it really transforms the business. But he'll tell you more.
Thanks,
Please.
Tatiana. Thanks, everybody. And I'm going to lead you through, as Tatiana said, about a 3-year journey that I've made so far in creating a PMO process here at Ingram Content Group. And so I'm going to get this started. Here we go. So we'll go over my background a bit, talk about Ingram Content Group, give you a little overview of what I've been looking at and what I've done over that time, kind of the desired model of how I wanted to outline the goals for building this PMO, and then I'll lead you through what we started with, sort of a midterm effort, and what I've been doing most recently. So this is going slow. There we go. So my background, I've been in the IT space for about 30 years. My background is not primarily in PMO, but it's built on development, architecture, consulting, leadership, and most recently I've been in the PMO space for about 5 or 6 years now. And I've been, like I said, at Ingram for 3 years. Apologize for the slow refresh here. So Ingram Content Group is the world's largest book distributor, and it serves publishers, retailers, educators, authors, libraries. So it is a worldwide company, and we are by far the largest distributor of those things. We also do print on demand, audio, EPUB books, privately held, and Ingram has been around for about 40 years. It's a really great place to be, for sure, and happy to be part of the company. There we go. So when I first got to Ingram, I basically had to start from scratch. We did not have a PMO in place, and there wasn't really much consistency of how we did things as far as project management or portfolio management or any of those kind of things that I'm going to get into today. And this is not particularly unusual. I've been in some other companies, and I'm sure that a lot of folks have been, where it's sort of, managing the project the best way you can and just getting things done. And so it's not particularly unique to Ingram, but from my standpoint, it was a great opportunity to start building something from scratch and adding that organization. There were some PMs in the company, but they were primarily, just doing whatever was needed to try to get the project over the finish line. And so there's no real consistency there. So not much going in, but what we did have was Office 365 and the associated tools at the time. So that was a place to start. So developing the process is one thing, and then, but the tools that you have to work with and those sorts of things are another entirely. And I'd like to add that we're going to go over really portfolio management, less of the project management and more of the overarching operational aspects of running a portfolio. We're even going to get into product management a bit. If I can get to the next slide, there we go. Here we go. So these are the kind of requirements that I looked at doing when I first took it on. It's like I said, not all about the tools and processes even, but envisioning that future state, and then adding incremental value was important. So, and not pushing it too fast. And that's kind of alluded to in the cultural change there, where you have to be patient, especially with an organization that does not have a lot of structure to begin with. You might have a lot of great ideas and things that you know will lead that company to further success, but you have to be patient and be mindful of the tolerance for change within that organization. You also have to create incentives for those stakeholders. So what's in it for me is a good question that people that will be affected or involved into the process will often ask. And these different stakeholders will have different questions and incentives. So for example, the CEO should be getting a clear picture of how their strategic goals are aligned, organized, and prioritized. So the things that they want to do, they need to have a clear picture of that when it's all put together. The executive sponsors, so those executives that report to that CEO, need to have organization around their program. So there are things that they specialize in and are responsible for. They need organization around that, and to be able to clearly show how it relates back to the strategic objectives of the CEO and the board and those sorts of leadership entities. And then you've got other things like capacity planning, which I'll touch on as well. So resource managers, when they're given a lot of work to do, they need to be able to show how they're going to meet that work and who's involved in it, and makes those conversations with their leadership and the people that they are working with, makes those conversations a lot easier when they're able to clearly show what their capacity is and their ability to meet work. And then product managers, they need to be able to clearly see managed requests created by initiatives. They need to be able to create roadmaps and things that clearly show where their product is heading. And so when you're looking at tool sets, need to use the tools and use them in ways to make things easier and not more complicated. Sometimes we have a temptation to overcomplicate things, but again, you have to move at the pace of the organization and the people that are going to be using those tools and make sure they understand it. Creating things that are visually appealing, and that's where SharePoint and the Virto tools come in handy. You can do a lot of different things with the tool sets, these tool sets, to make things really nice looking and easy to understand. So I think that is a real key when considering doing these things. Another sort of pitfall you can fall into is just assuming that everybody understands what you're trying to do, what you've built, and how they might use it. So, always be careful about, if you're going to build something, you're going to add new capability, make sure to document it well, train people, and provide as much documentation as you can. And that will certainly help make sure everybody's on the same page. All right, so here's kind of what I looked at when I considered all the scope of work that I wanted to take on to try to build things. And I looked at it with kind of a top-down vision, where at the top is portfolio management. So this is everything strategically that you're doing within the company, and those should be well-defined goals. And then everything filters down from that. That's why I kind of like this illustration, that everything at the top should be connected to everything that you're doing within the organization. And then you basically organize portfolios or programs underneath there. So you might have sales, marketing, IT, you know, all of these different departments and organizations within the company have their own expertise and function. And then they have a collection of things that they're doing, and that collection of things, which I call a program, should align to everything that the company wants done. You know, if you're trying to reduce debt, you're trying to become more profitable, whatever it is, those programs should contain initiatives that align to those goals. And then the product life cycle is also influenced by that. So you have products within your organization. We have software products at Ingram. We have, you know, internal functions that do things. So you've got strategic initiatives that call for certain things to be done, and maybe that initiative will span multiple products. So these products have to change in order to meet these goals. So you need a way to manage that as well. And the product itself will have an evolution as well. I mean, a product cycle is continuous, whereas a project has a distinct beginning and an end. So two different life cycles, and yet they influence each other, and that has to be accounted for. And there's other things that support all of this, and that is status reporting. You know, so how's this initiative going? Finding an efficient way to do that without meeting all the time. Capacity planning, I touched on that earlier, where the ability of a resource provider or resource manager to be able to articulate what sort of capacity or ability they have to meet the demand is very important. You know, a manager can lay out a roadmap and say, here's what I'm going to be doing for the next 6 months. And if you ask them, well, how are you going to actually do it with the resources you have? Sometimes that's a hard conversation. A lot of times you can look back on a roadmap that you did a year before, and maybe you got a lot done or maybe a little done, but I bet part of the reason, along with you know, changes in the business, might be that you didn't forecast your ability to meet that demand, and might be a reason why it's not exactly the way you thought it was going to turn out. Time tracking, so another kind of a support tool, lends itself well to tracking budgets. Also, evaluating whether or not your capacity, the people and the capacity that you think are working on something are actually doing work. I've seen some instances where we thought we had 8 people allocated to something, and while we did, only partial of that capacity was actually allocated, and we were able to identify that early in a project and get those people back into, you know, if they're allocated 100% or 50%, try to get that number where it should be, so we would get the velocity on the project that we would expect. So a lot of different things that go into managing the entire aspect of portfolio and project management. So this is kind of a snapshot of what I tried to do early with some of the basic tools. This is before Virto was introduced and some of the other advanced SharePoint things. And basically my goal was to get us out of spreadsheets for one thing. And that in a lot of companies, that's the way things run. And you could run, you know, a lot of things in spreadsheets, but it's very hard to share information that way. It's very hard to have an overall vision of things and organize things in a real effective way. So a lot of the areas were siloed. And when you run things like that, it's tempting to put most of the accountability on a single process or department within a company. For example, IT gets a lot of the burden in IT heavy shops where, hey, we've got a project to deliver. Why hasn't IT finished this thing? And all we really have is a spreadsheet that kind of shows, well, this initiative is late, and that's really all it is. So when you have the ability to put information and things about a project together, what the owners are, what the products are involved are, what the timeline expectations, all of those sorts of things, you can start to share accountability across departments and not just make it a one-trick pony, one place of accountability. So, you know, as a result of that and how that was working, the expectations weren't very high for IT's in this circumstance ability to deliver, because IT, quite frankly, wasn't used to meeting them. And that's basically because without this structure and without this organization, it's very difficult to know exactly what your ability is to get things done and project that and organize it. And, you know, that comes with limited collaboration, limited visibility, and consistency. So the SharePoint solution basically put together these initiatives into what I call the enterprise backlog. And it tried to outline things within an executive sponsor at the top. So a C-level leader with their various departments they have under them, and then find a sponsor, so generally a VP level, that would align to that executive and be responsible for a certain segment of a department. And then to try to find ownership underneath there, like a director or a project manager or someone that's responsible for delivering the initiative across the finish line. So organizing people and departments and processes within these initiatives were important. And then you start to add that accountability that might have been missing. So, you know, the sponsor, for example, is responsible for tracking to his budget, to his or her budget. And, you know, the owner might be responsible for delivering the project from a project management standpoint and reporting status, those sorts of things. Adding cadence. So cadence of meetings and review processes are added along with this. And SharePoint can do a lot of that for you, where you'll see a little later, we can add status reports, alerts, all kinds of things to automate things and make things easier to share. But there were some cons. Limited ability to visualize the portfolio, not very attractive. It's it's basically a bunch of lists. And yes, you can organize it and report on it, but you know, in my experience, it also helps to have things that are visually appealing. But it was definitely a start. It was better than spreadsheets. But some cultural challenges that came with it. Programs, not everybody understands what a program is. And trying to get people's heads wrapped around that you have strategic goals, you have very important things you need to do, and what is the collection of those initiatives that are going to accomplish those goals. And they might be very different tactically and within the project, but they all align to the same strategic goal. And when you pull all those things together, we could call those a program. And then we didn't have a really great idea of how to prioritize things. You know, what's the most important thing that we should be doing to meet those goals? But again, it was a start, and we were successful getting things going. So later, when we got a little bit further down the road, I talked about the visual aspects of management are important. So part of that is using SharePoint's native functionality, and the hubs, for example, are really nice to use. A hub within SharePoint, you can collect multiple sites and relate those together and put those under the same umbrella. Hero is a nice plug-in. You can see in this slide the really nice organization of different links, really, that take you to different pages. But you can present those really nicely and cleanly and give it a really good look. Quick links are another thing we'll see some more of. And then web apps, like most all the Virto tools, you can embed within a modern SharePoint site and provide direct access to the content without actually having to go to the Virto board menu, for example, and sift through a bunch of different boards. And in my case, I literally probably have upwards to 100 boards to go through. So I needed a way to organize those efficiently, and SharePoint really does help with that visual presentation. Now we're going to get into some of the capability evolution. So things that were done to start to merge things. So I talked a little bit about the enterprise backlog. It's basically a collection of initiatives that are organized within the company hierarchy and leadership. And then we had status reports over here that weren't really tied together. So, and it was mainly just IT providing those, but they weren't really connected, and we had to kind of jump around. We basically merged the two. So we have an initiative that we're tracking a lot of things on that, but we also add the ability to tie a status report to it, basically within the same record, without duplicating the efforts. So you could run your portfolio management process and have input from IT in a separate process and a separate cadence, and have those two married up together and provide really a seamless way to report status within a portfolio review, for example, or for an executive, and they don't have to, you know, hunt things down or look for a Word document somewhere or whatever it might be. It's all there available directly to them. And then some other things that are really nice is, you know, you can add Automation. Automation is a big deal to me because when you're tying these things together and you're pushing out information and that sort of stuff, you need some sort of automation tools like Microsoft Flow is a big tool within the Office 365 suite that I use a lot to automate common processes, to send out reminders, to send out alerts, to transfer data from one place to another. All kinds of things can be done with Flow. It's a really great tool. Also Virto Alerts, which has similar workflow and does some really nice things as well. So use both of those tools to do things that really shouldn't involve a human to do, and they're really great to use. And I talked about product management a bit earlier. So the product management lifecycle is different than your portfolio management lifecycle. You have products that have a definite life cycle that really don't have a beginning or an end. We're just iterating through changes and enhancements and fixes within this product. But they're not really separate or they're not independent. They are influenced by the project portfolio. So I mentioned earlier that those products have their, or influenced, they have their own initiatives and the things they want to do. But when you have an initiative that spans changes to several different products, they need a way to accept those incoming requests. So one of the additional integrations that we did was basically to be able to define a product on an initiative. And when you did that, it would actually go out through Microsoft Flow and create a request initiative within the product lifecycle. So a product manager would see some things coming in that were related to an initiative, and they'd be able to manage that within their own lifecycle and tie it directly to what they were doing and put that within their roadmap. So that made it really nice for them to see what the company initiatives were, how it affected their product, and how they would manage it on the back end within their life cycle. We can also design, as an example in this slide, product groups. So you can group several different products under one umbrella. You can show those initiatives in your Kanban tools and swim lanes and those sorts of things. You can assign those to releases. You can do lots of nice things that at a high level you would want to see, along with roadmaps, Gantt charts. Virto Gantt chart is used to create roadmaps. All kinds of different things you can leverage, and you can also leverage security. So SharePoint has a really nice security framework, and so if you needed to lock down some things within a product group or portfolio, you can do that fairly easily. We can also sync down status reports, again with Flow. So if you're providing a status report on an initiative and you have one product involved that's managed at a different level, you can sync down those status reports right into that different process. So again, automating things, making them less cumbersome, eliminating duplicate effort is a big thing and another strong case for using Microsoft Flow and SharePoint. So the next thing on the list is guides and documentation. So touching on more of the SharePoint capability, a modern site really gives you a nice palette, if you will, to create some really good documentation. Some recent features in the past year, they've added some side panels and embedded links to headers. Those sorts of things can allow you to create the ability to create these nice documents and jump down exactly to where you want to be in the documentation. So some really nice things that you can do in the modern SharePoint environment. Okay, so when we started to add the Virto tools, which you've talked a little bit about, there's a ton of things that that we can do with the Virto Kanban cards in particular. Much better view of the status reports, initiatives. Swim lanes are a big thing. You can group things by those process owners that I've talked about earlier, your sponsors, your executive sponsors. All of that could be nicely organized and personalized for different audiences. And lots of different granular capabilities that you can add to the Kanban tool to make it very personalized. Different colors, different indicators. You get pictures of owners, people that are responsible for it right there, pulled from Active Directory. If you have that in your organization, lots of different things that you can do to make it very visually appealing. And then the Gantt charts are another thing. And behind the scenes, you have lots of ability to define rules in queries. The Gantt chart, for example, allows you to embed some actually, some pseudocode in there to actually do queries on your SharePoint lists and make it very granular and it's very powerful. The language is called CAML, and it's really powerful to use. Let's see. And the next thing is, if I can get here, we'll touch on the status reports a bit. So further talking about the Kanban tool, I really like the ability to define information in different parts of the visual experience. So on the card itself, you can show critical information, health information via colors. Little sidebars can help show if something's late or on time. And then I really like the pop-out tooltip. So if you click on a card and it slides right, you put things like description, the current update, your next update, business impact, those sorts of things that have narratives that are text fields are really nicely displayed with this pop-out and how it sort of slides right. So that really gives the visual impact and is really easy to follow. So if you go into a meeting and your audience is not familiar with what you're about to present or even the tools that you're using or anything, people catch on really quickly by using some of these really nice visual tools, and the Virto Kanban tool is certainly one of those really strong tools that you can use to do that. The status reports again are tied to those initiatives, and so we can organize the boards and content in a way that not only provides visual state information about where the project is, but at a glance, you can also see health and status information in a one-stop shop. So I mentioned earlier that I have a whole bunch of boards, and here's a kind of a slice of those. It's a little impractical to send somebody to the big Kanban menu that shows all 100 reports or whatever it is. So going back to SharePoint, some of its strengths and the Virto tool strengths is the Kanban board gives you the ability to directly link to a report. So with that ability, you can design a really nice page that nicely lays out the different reports and what they're for in nice categories. And you can use that with quick links, as you're seeing here. That's a little web app that's native in a SharePoint page, and link directly to that. And then on the back end of that thing, you've got a custom board that shows filtered information, different swim lanes, all of the different things that, depending on what your audience is, you want to be able to show, and you can do it very quickly. Here we go. So touching a little bit more on Flow and Virto alerts, I've found many different ways to use Flow and Virto alerts. And so, in this example, I've got an alert that goes out that a date changed. So a common problem is, if you got a system like this, or any system really, dates change on initiatives, and an end date you might think it's 5/1. You get close to that date, you decide to move it to 6/1. So you have a date change, and therefore expectations need to change as well. So you can leverage these sorts of tools to identify changes in the data directly on an initiative, react to that. Flow will run in the background. Virto Alerts does the same thing. And it can raise that event or issue, and then you can respond to it by sending out alerts and notifications to your stakeholders. So instead of having to get a meeting together to let everybody know or send out emails manually, the system does it for you. It also avoids surprises. Hey, I thought that was due, 5/1, and that's 6/1. Oh, it's always been 6/1. You avoid those sorts of discussions because those issues are raised immediately whenever they happen. So that's a really nice automated way to do things. And it also drives accountability, because I can tell you that if someone knows, if I change the date on this project, my boss and his boss is probably going to get an email saying that the date has changed, and therefore questions are going to be asked. And you can send out more routine things like status reports are available. So if you've got a cadence of regular updates every week, you can send notifications to the owner requesting an update. You can send the next day a request to the sponsor whose job it is to review that status report, to review it. And then finally, the executive who needs to review the portfolio, you can notify as well at some other time. So lots of different ways to use notifications efficiently. Here is another example of Flow. So some more advanced things you can do. All this information we have, this alerting capability, data changes, you can send things to teams. So one of the nice things about Flow is it has all these connectors. So you connect different technologies, not only within Office 365, but even externally. You can detect changes, send information, massage it, do whatever you want to, and send it to these different clients and applications. Another thing you can do is audit. So the middle section here shows an example of using Flow to actually poke in a comment in a notes field on an initiative or a status report saying, here's the original date that somebody put in here, and then they came along and changed it to another date. So not only do you get that alert that's sent out, but you have an audit trail that you can look at a glance and see when state changes happen, when date changes happen. Those sorts of things can be watched and audited whenever you want to. Okay, some other tools that are helpful. I've touched on this quite a bit, the capacity planning. So, using things like Excel, it's a big deal to be able to leverage Excel in the proper ways. I don't think it's a great way to organize your portfolio, but it is a good way to model your capacity and your demand. And we've actually built tools to do that. The capacity planner is a great way for a manager to be able to show how their ability to meet the demand is actually modeled out. And so, leverage all the tools that you can, for sure, and Excel is actually a good tool to use in the right way. Budget tracking is another thing that is done in Excel. Lots of forecast information, you tie in your labor there, professional services, all that sort of stuff. A PM typically uses, at least within our organization, to make sure that we're on track, and sometimes to double check finance and what's coming through accounting and those sorts of things. We found issues there by using a combination of time tracking, forecasts, those sorts of things, to be able to identify discrepancies within the budget process. Another thing just to add here is the time tracking element, both with capacity planning and budget tracking, is used to verify assumptions. So I mentioned earlier that you're assuming that a certain capacity or segment of workforce is on a project, and you turn around the next month and you realize because of your actuals and what they're actually spending on it, they're underperforming, or maybe they're overperforming. Maybe you're spending more time than you thought, and that could be a concern as well, because you're spending too much, or you're not spending enough on capital projects. That can be an issue. Capacity planning. I work with managers that really learn a lot through doing capacity planning by saying, okay, this is my forecast and what my people are doing. And then the next month, we actually pull in that time tracking information, and it overlays all that information over their forecast, and will actually show whether or not, they're actually doing what they thought they were going to do. Sometimes, hey, we're spending a lot more time on this than I ever thought. We need to look into that. Or we're not spending nearly as much time. Where are we spending our time? So you're able to answer a lot of those questions by using some of these support tools. And so the latest efforts that we have going on right now, we've got the portfolio management system, and over the past 6 to 8 months, I would say, our senior executives have really gotten more into the strategic organization of the portfolio, which is not something, it's probably the last silo that we're trying to break down, where these people would get together and actually talk to each other about what's best for the company at the highest strategic goals. We had some of that, but not a whole lot. So right now the effort is putting organization around the strategic portfolio, identifying programs that are most important to the company, so groups of related functionality or initiatives that align to high-level strategic goals. And then within the portfolio itself, in that program, identifying the specific projects that are highest priority and being able to marshal those appropriately according to the need. And so we're not only introducing new tool sets and abilities to do that, but also adding to the cadence of reviews and expectations at the different leadership levels on how they actually review these things on a regular basis. And again, documentation, very easy in SharePoint. You can really lay things out nicely. And this is another example of targeted reporting. This is a side-by-side example. You also have list reports, and there are times when you want a list view versus the Kanban view, and you can provide both of those side by side. Another strength of SharePoint that is really nice, and you have people that prefer one over the other. So and with really minimal effort, you can provide both of those types of reporting very easily. And I think that might be it. I can get this thing. Yeah, here we go.